Hello and welcome everyone. Today we're going to be looking at a VGCS match from the Waifu Is Laifu VGCS. This matchup is going to be between the Blademaster deck piloted by Nicholas Ho and the Luard deck piloted by none other than Ryan Kai, who is a pretty well-known player. So, this is taking place in Malaysia, which is quite active in his competitive scene for Vanguard. And now we're already going into the turn 2 of Ryan's turn. So he went into the Noise, and we can see that Nicholas got a draw trigger as his first damage, which is definitely quite nice. So this does take place before, I believe, the release of the Link Choker Clan Booster. So it was a little bit of a while ago, but I've had quite a backlog of other videos. So Nicholas is going to use his Kaguro to search out for a Stride fodder. We'll see if he actually used that for the Stride or just to search for a different Blademaster. But it's definitely an interesting move, but it also shows that he has it seems he has at least a couple grade 3s in his hand as well, so I guess that's... Okay, let's see, I think he might actually need to search for the Blademaster. Oh, never mind, he's just going to thin his deck, so that is definitely understandable. And pretty much just a solid move. So, as we see here also, one thing that I forgot to note is that Nicholas does run the 10k vanillas in his Blademaster. I've seen a few Blademaster lists do that as well. There's been a few that don't. It kind of depends on the local meta, I would say. But I feel like 10k vanillas have more or less become a staple in a lot of decks that require that kind of early defense to not get rushed. With some decks, it can actually backfire if the opponent takes advantage of that and knows at which counterblast they want to do each of their skills. So now Ryan calls the Grozny in the back, which is quite an interesting move, because this way he'll be able to profit off of its skill next turn if he takes the first stride. So, because then he can go into the first stride and immediately use the stride skill to call something, and the Grozny will immediately start gaining the power. So, looks like Ryan will be receiving the first stride too, as Nicholas does run up to the grade 3 Blademaster Kouen. So he calls down a critical as well. He's going to swing with a 14k column. This is going to require a 10k shield. Nothing too amazing so far, but trying to accelerate Ryan's damage as well. I feel like this is still a comfortable guard, and then you could easily take the Vanguard attack. So because this will be hitting for a total of 23, which is definitely a little bit tight to be guarding at this early stage of the game, and he does take it and puts himself up to 3 damage. So now Ryan most likely will ride into the Luard, as we see, and he ditches the Stride fodder to go into the Aura Geyser Doomed. This is a very good play for him because he can, well, most likely remove both of the units on Nicholas's field, and at the same time pump up the power on Grozny, which is really nice. That call last turn is going to prove to be very useful, even though he is facing against Kaguro, meaning that even if Grozny does go up to a lot of power, there is a potential chance that Nicholas will simply G-guard against the Grozny and just kill it off with the Denial Griffin. But we're not sure if... Oh yes, he does have the heal in hand. Okay, so we're pretty sure that that possibility exists. We're not sure if he'll use it, but there's definitely the possibility. But, alright, so the Creeping Dark Goat has been used, and he gets another Luard grade 3 in his hand. The Grozny gets promoted to the front, and the Raven stand trigger gets called, and the skill is activated to return it to the deck and shuffle the deck, and then he'll be able to top deck call after that, and then Grozny will build up the skill. So this is essentially the, well, in quotations, loop that we've seen a lot of Luard decks do, where they essentially just use the stand trigger to keep calling units in, you know, just in rested form, and then the Grozny gains power. And then you can use effects like Aura Geyser Doom to retire the rested units, and then maybe call another stand trigger and use the skill again, as we see Ryan is doing right here. So now the Grozny is already up by 15k if I'm not mistaken, so it's definitely building up in power, and the fact that you can do this every single turn is definitely quite scary, because the stand always goes back to your deck, and the later you get into the game, the more you'll be able to loop it as well. Here we see the Belial Owl, which is definitely a very nice call for Ryan, so it's definitely going to be quite good for him because he's going to be able to amass even more cards in his hand. He runs the Babbed Car, which is definitely quite interesting. That is a very old grade 3, which allows him to top deck call, and he gets the Abyssal Owl, which is definitely very sexy. So let's see. He will most likely use the Owl. Oh no, he doesn't. Okay, never mind. I guess he didn't really have a need to, or possibly he already went through all of his Luards. I'm not too sure on that one though. So he attacked with the car line, which was quite small. Now he attacked with the Doomed. He gets a heal, putting himself down to 2 damage, which is definitely very good for him. And also powering up his Grozny even more. Now we know that Nicholas does have the heal in hand, so he could potentially just take this. Or, well, he could either G-guard it and kill it off, or he could just take it because it's only hitting for 1 damage. But, okay, he does decide to take it. I'm not sure if that was a good move. I think it was quite alright. Because overall, it's just a good move for the sake of, you know, not having to overextend on this turn's Grozny, because it's gonna have just as much power, if not more, next turn as well. So he's gonna have to save that heal for later anyway, or at least have 1 heal in his hand regardless. So yeah, I think it's alright for him to take that, but let's hope he doesn't get punished for it later on, because being on 4 damage does allow Ryan to profit off of the pressure points that the Luard deck can put on. So Nicholas is going to drop the Blademaster Kouen to stride and goes into the Mustafa, so he'll be able to burn quite a few rear guards away. So we'll see just who he decides to target, and we can see Ryan has 10 cards in hand. I would normally be surprised, but this is a Luard deck, so honestly I am not allowed to be, because it's definitely a, you know, pretty standard hand size for this kind of deck. So I think Nicholas's hand is also pretty healthy, at least, you know, it seems to be. So he uses Blademaster Koun's strike skill finally to retire the Grozny, which is definitely a good move, because Grozny is going to be the source of all his problems for this turn if he doesn't get rid of it. And he calls the Neo Flame, so he'll be able to burn an entire column if he chooses to. So now he's going to use the Mustafa skill to flip face up the Sabreeze and kill off the Babkar, and now the Neo Flame will also retire the Swordbreaker. Now, well, Ryan is left with just 1 rear guard, but I don't think it's going to be too difficult for him to return his field. We can see some of the cards in his hand that will help him do that as well. He calls another of the Blademaster crits, so he's going to be able to draw an additional card afterwards. And so, unfortunately, Nicholas is left with no counterblast, but that should not be the biggest problem in the long run. So Ryan does take that one. He gets a 5k from the Belial Owl hitting the damage zone. That's not the best thing. You kind of want your Belial Owls either in your deck or, you know, just waiting for them to be called the next turn. He gets another draw trigger, I think the 3rd of this game already. Or possibly 2nd. He gets another heal, meaning that he'll be able to double denial if he chooses to do that, which is definitely a pretty nice thing to have. And now it looks like Ryan is simply activating the Ritual 3 skill of Luard to be able to return 2 of his grade 1s to the bottom of the deck to be able to stride without paying the cost. So that's also quite nice, and another advantage of the Luard deck. So at this stage, there are a few targets he can go for. I don't think, because currently he has, I believe, just 2 face-up G units. Yeah, that's right. So he's going to go into the Doomed once again, and using the strike skill to counterblast 1 and retire the Owl in order to call a Swordbreaker and an Esras. So the Esras will be able to return to his hand, because I do believe that he does have 1 in his drop zone. So he used the Swordbreaker to Soul Blast 1 and draw 1 card. So now he's still... there's the Grozny. I was wondering when the next one would hit the field. And he's going to call the Noise, which is going to let him look at, I believe, the top 5 cards of the deck. And then, okay, he calls the Raven over the Esras. So that's a pretty solid move. I'm not sure if he had an Esras in his hand beforehand or not, but I'm not too certain on that. But he's going to return the Raven stand trigger to his deck and going to be able to top deck call and gain more power on the Grozny. So he calls the Fodla and is going to be able to use her immediately. That's a pretty nice top deck. He's going to call another Raven from it and the Belial Owl, so those are definitely both good targets. He's going to be able to kill them both, well, kill off the critical trigger and also, well, kill off the Belial and... oh, that's quite interesting. So he called both of them on top of the pre-existing units. So he's going to first use the Raven again to call another rested unit. So let's see what he decides to do. His deck is thinning very rapidly, so with those stand triggers returning and the critical triggers returning as well, he's able to definitely profit quite a lot off of all these calls. So now he has another 2 Belial Owls. He's going to use the Esras, this time to retire the standing Belial Owl and return the Perfect Shield to one of them to his bottom of the deck and one to his hand. And now the Raven will once again use its skill. This is definitely the loopy build of Luard. I think this is the one that a lot of people have gotten used to by now. It's definitely quite scary because Grozna just keeps building up power more and more and more and more and more. And unless you're playing a red clan like Kaguro or Narukami, or I guess in some way Link Joker as well, it's going to be very hard to deal with it because, especially in the later stages, like when you're on 4 damage or something, like that's going to be hitting. Plus, you already know that because of the Raven, the Luard player is playing stands, so if that Grozna stand, that's going to be even scarier. So definitely not something you want to run into. I've played against the deck myself, and it's definitely quite scary, especially since, you know, I do play Dimension Police all the time, and, you know, facing against this deck is quite scary and can sometimes become very clutch. But with Luard, there are a lot of different paths that you can take when you build it. I've seen many different players try out different things. I feel like now Grozna has solidified itself as the most consistent, I suppose, because of this combo, but now that Kaguro is very prominent again, I'm not sure how, I guess how realistic that is, because, you know, they may have to adapt because Grozna just won't be as important or won't be putting in as much work, and especially now that also Link Joker is in the formula of the meta, I guess. It's also not going to be too great because this deck very heavily relies on being able to profit off the field. So we'll see how things develop. As I mentioned before, this game is before the Link Joker clan booster. So now he's using the Raven again. As we can see, this is basically one of the loopier turns. He's already on his 2nd dice. So Ryan's definitely making full profit off of his deck build right now. And there is a... Okay, he's just using the Noise to check the top 5 and get himself a Raven. Damn, he's just going at it. And what I'd also like to mention, I find this kind of funny, but Blademaster Kowen's skill does, you know, only activate when the opponent has no rear guards, but so far in 2 turns already, we've had a situation where Nicholas had no rear guards and Ryan was actually the one with all the rear guards, so it's quite interesting. A bit unfortunate, of course, but still quite an interesting twist on poor Blademaster Kowen's skill. But Blademaster as a deck is honestly very interesting. I'm overall a really big fan of it, and it's nice that it was essentially the strongest Kaguro deck for quite a while, and now we do know the new Overlords, which I'm very excited about, but we'll see if Overlord is actually going to be able to do enough to actually overcome how strong Blademaster is currently. But, you know, we'll see. I think Blademaster is still going to be able to stand quite strong for a while, but we'll see if that changes over time or not. Now, I don't think that Ryan has used his... I think he's used his Orgeyser Doom by now. I think. I'm not... It's kind of hard to see if it's 2 or 3, but while I was talking, I may have missed it, but I'm pretty sure he actually did. So I do apologize if I do get that wrong. But if I'm not mistaken, he also has a Grozna in the back, which is quite interesting. He might just try to thin his deck until it's just stands, and then just stand that Grozna, like, you know, it's no problem. Just have 2 huge Groznas, like, have fun dropping 2 heals to kill them. The other thing is that because Nicholas doesn't have any open counterblast, he will have to take at least one of these attacks, and it's definitely not the Vanguard one that you want to be taking. So essentially, you know, with enough crits, there's a chance. I don't think he can close out the game, but Ryan can definitely, with the knowledge of Nicholas's hand, there's definitely quite a bit of manipulation he can do in order to control how he's going to be able to guard it. And speaking of Ryan, he's actually one of the most well-known Southeast Asian players. He has achieved a lot and is a very consistent topper, so I'm very honored to actually be able to commentate one of his games, especially as he's playing his main current deck, as if I'm not mistaken, I believe it is. Luard is his main deck, so it's definitely quite amazing to be able to see this, and honestly, I'm sure a lot of you have heard or met or play maybe in the same logos as Ryan Kai, so he's definitely quite an amazing person to see. So And for those of you that don't know, the Waifu Is Laifu VGCS did take place a while ago. I do not think there has been a second one announced yet, but there are quite a few VGCS style tournaments in Malaysia, like the Senpai Notice Me VGCS, and some others I hope are also being started. I know that overall, in general, in the general like Southeast Asian region, there's quite a lot of fan tournaments being run, so it's definitely quite nice to see, as lately there's been also ones in Europe, like the CRC or the DFUC I did myself. So it's definitely nice to see a lot of players themselves take the initiative and start these tournaments, and I think it's a very good move by the community to try and make more of these unofficial tournaments because it allows you to develop more of a competitive playing field. So we're going into Ryan's drive check at long last. He gets double stand already. So as we said, the Grozny was just sitting there in the back. It was rested, but it was just sitting there in the back waiting for the stand trigger to come out, and now, you know, it's got the power, it's got the stands. Like, this is definitely quite scary. So I think Nicholas made the right choice to no guard the Vanguard, because now he can, you know, like, I'm pretty sure there aren't many crits left in that deck anyway, because he's called pretty much all of his Belials and drawn off them. So he's just counting Ryan's deck. I think there's like 3 cards left. Although if he has all 4, I think he only has 3 Belials, because one of the Belials hit the damage zone. I don't think he healed that away yet. So he will be going up to a 6 deck count, if I'm not mistaken. But is definitely, you know, living on the edge, as we can say about this situation. So I think Nicholas now has to make the choice. Never mind. He had to decide if he wants to make the choice to destroy the Grozny or not. But it looks like he's just gonna drop one of his G guards to destroy the right Grozny. And yeah, now he's returning his criticals. Yeah, as I said, there's 3 left in his drop zone because the last one is in the damage zone. So we can see that he still has 3 heals in his hand now. This is definitely looking very good for Nicholas. Like, being able to just drop the Nile Griffins whenever he wants, as long as he has the counterblast for it, is definitely a pretty nice luxury to have. So one of the things that the Blademaster deck is not, unfortunately, well, does not have the luxury to have is the Overlord G-Guard, which allows you to burn the opponent's back row. But it looks like he's gonna go for the Ziegenburg, which is one of the most prominent strides in the game right now, I would say, because it essentially remodeled the way that a lot of Kaguro players built their decks, as it was just with Ziegenburg in mind. He calls the Mubdi, which is gonna be able to gain some power as well, so he's gonna have a quite aggressive turn, I would say. So the Ziegenburg overall is definitely it's a very scary stride. So it's quite interesting to see that he's gonna go into it now. His opponent is on 3 damage, so I'm not sure if he'll be able to close it out on this turn, but he'll at least be able to push the damage to a point that he'll be able to close it out next turn if he manages to survive the next Luard turn. Because, you know, in the end, every Luard turn is pretty scary. Although, I think at this stage, Ryan might be running out of juice a little bit, because he did combo very hard last turn, and, you know, it's understandable because he could have essentially pushed for game. But also, I feel like Ryan should have known that there was the heal in Nicholas's hands, so probably the game normally wouldn't have ended there. But we'll see how things end. So for now, this is just a... Oh wow, the heal. The heal came off. Okay, so he still had a heal left in there. So here's the first Perfect Guard. He gets a Mubdi, a Protect Orb, and another Mubdi, so no triggers from that drive check. I think Nicholas's deck is also kind of thinning. So he's going to use the Ziegenburg. He only has to discard 1 card because Ryan only has 1 card left on the field. So Ziegenburg's skill does essentially makes you discard as many as your opponent has rear guards, I believe. So if your opponent has no rear guards, you don't pay any cost. If he has 1, you discard 1. If he has 2, you discard 2, etc. So now Luard's skill is going to activate, and he's going to be able to return 2 grade 1s to stride for free. So now I believe... Let's see, I think he has 7 cards. No, he had 6, 5, yeah, I think he has 7 cards left in the deck now. Oh no, it should be 6 because he drew 1 for the turn. So that still gives him the flexibility to go for a stride easily. I think the best stride target at this point is gonna be possibly the Luard stride, the new Luard stride, the GR. Wow, Nicholas's hand is massive. Like, he's gonna be able to put up with a lot of attacks. And the only bad part is that sadly Nicholas doesn't have any open counterblast, so the chances of a Denial Griffin are looking pretty slim. I don't think... Well, he would have to Protect Orb into a G-Guard essentially. So we'll see. But we do know that he has the Protect Orb in hand. I'm not sure if he has one in the drop zone. I believe he does, but we'll see. We see Ryan's hand hovered over that Luard stride. He was definitely considering. And the Luard stride is very strong. Let me tell you that. It is a very strong stride. And now he's hovering over the Carnivore, which is also an interesting choice. So either to get rid of some of the opponent's rear guards or to simply buff up his own unit. So let's see. It does go for the Carnivore. That is an interesting choice. So he does not go for the Luard GR just yet. He's gonna try to close out the game right here, because I'm not sure if it's gonna be possible though, because while Nicholas is on 5 damage, he has a massive hand, and I think with the Luard GR it would have maybe been a bit easier, because at least you have a bit of a guard restrict plus a really big number on top of that. Like, essentially, against the guard restriction of the Luard stride, you're gonna have to just G-guard into huge numbers, or it's gonna be pretty scary. We can see Ryan also has 3 Esras in his drop zone, which is, you know, pretty attractive. He uses the stand trigger, and with his, I believe now, back to 7 card deck. So he checks the top 2, and he has 3 cards left in deck, so he can only really call 1, I think, unless he has other things that will come back to the deck, because... yeah, that's kind of scary. I guess also with the problem with the Luard stride is that even if he did go into it, he would be drive checking more, and therefore possibly just deck out on the spot. So it's an interesting train of thought, but he used the Raven again. So put 1 card back, but possibly 2 will come out. You can also choose not to actually call any, but I'm not sure if that's the wisest choice in this situation, because he's not exactly... like, well, he's using the stand trigger, he's not actually going to call anything. Okay. Like, in the end, he is using the Ravens, but the thing is, like, I think the Ravens' like purpose right now is to just make sure he doesn't deck out, because in the end, if he... like, he doesn't have a Grozna on the field, meaning he can't really build up power or anything, so in the end, it's a little bit tight for him. So now Nicholas does have to retire 2 units, so he chooses the Lava Flow and the Blademaster Kouen. So he still has the Mubdi on the field, meaning he still has the Intercept, which is quite nice. So now he's going to attack with, I believe, an 11 on the Vanguard, so this is not going to be a very strong turn. I think Ryan just wants to essentially survive, and that's a pretty nice guard. He just kills off the Abyssal Owl. I'm not sure if that was... I feel like keeping the the Belial Owl. I feel like keeping the Belial Owl on the field might have actually been a bit scarier, because that way, like... well, scarier in the sense that scarier for Ryan, because he would not be able to return it to the deck, and he would come even closer to decking out. So now we see the brand new G-Guard from Fighters Collection, which just retired Ryan's final rear guard. So now it's essentially... he just has to... I think as long as Nicholas just perfect guards it, like in a way that he has enough defensive power to the point that it reaches a perfect guard, then he doesn't really have much to be worried about, because like chances are Ryan will get a triple trigger on this turn, because he has, like, he's thinned his deck to that point. And so I think as long as he can guard to the point that it's a no pass, I think it'll be quite alright. Looks like he just calls the heal trigger, so into the Guardian Circle. So interesting, he doesn't G-Guard. I think that's understandable, as he still wants to G-Guard the next turn. So it wasn't a triple trigger, he got 1 perfect guard off of that. And now he's going to be able to use his criticals. I believe there's only 2. I don't think he called the last one. Yeah, or possibly he drew it. I'm not too sure on that one. But yeah, now he's going to be able to... Nicholas is going to be able to use Kouen's skill, because finally Ryan does not have any rear guards. It finally happened. It took all these turns to finally get there. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, we saw in I believe Nicholas's damage check, there was one of those grade 3s that we don't really often see. I think it's one of the Dragon Knights that pumps itself up by 5k or possibly 10k. I'm not too certain, but that's definitely the first time I've ever seen that. So definitely quite interesting. So I think now Ryan asked to see all of Nicholas's triggers in the drop zone and in the damage zone. So just, you know, it is public knowledge after all, so just sorting them out like this does make it easier. I also apologize, every now and then there is a finger in the camera. As with a lot of the commentaries that I do not record them. I simply ask the tournament organizers if they can send me their footage for me to commentate. So, now that the triggers are public knowledge, it's just down to Nicholas to decide what he wants to go for, because I think they both have just about as many cards in hand. But Ryan's, I'm trying to count it, but I'm thinking it's about 9 or 10, which arguably isn't all that much for a Luard player, but he's also on 4 damage, and like we can't really, we see one perfect card, we see a few triggers, but it really depends. So he's going for the Ziegenburg. So once again, as we said before, Ziegenburg is definitely one of the most like annoying pressure points of Kaguro, as it has essentially redefined the clan for the time being at least. So now he's gonna go with the Mubdi, and I believe the Mubdi now has gained a plus 10k buff because, well, Ryan's field is completely open, and I believe it does gain a plus 2000 buff for each open rearguard circle. So now Ryan is going to G-Guard, I believe the first one of the game, into the Fighters Collection one. Yep, so let's see if, well, he can't, I believe the skill only pulls up units from the rearguard circle, so he won't be able to use that either. So I think now he's on 26, and this attack normally is also 26, so I believe he's missing a 5k, if I'm not mistaken. But I might actually be mistaken, so I apologize if I am. But now he's just gonna perfect guard this first Ziegenburg, but the nice point is that Nicholas is gonna be able to counterblast 1 and not have to discard anything for the Ziegenburg. That is definitely very nice. So that is one of the strong points of Ziegenburg. You essentially +1. He gets a stand trigger on the Mubdi. That is really big. That is actually huge. That was actually huge. He goes into the Plot Maker, which guards the whole attack, so that's definitely not a problem. But wow, that was actually quite a clutch stand. I believe he's playing the 4 stands. I have not taken a close look at Nicholas's build just yet, but the Mubdi is definitely coming in clutch, so it's quite nice to see. So Ryan once again will take advantage of Luard's stride skill to return 2 of his Abyssal Owls to the bottom of the deck in order to stride for free. So it's quite good because, again, he's trying his best to survive and not deck out. He goes for the GB8, which is definitely interesting. We haven't seen the GB8 too much, or, well, we haven't seen it in this game, obviously, because, well, most players play only one. But I wasn't sure, again, I feel like there was this consideration between the GB8 and the Luard stride. So he's going to be able to essentially kill off as many of his units and then call as many, I believe, grade 1s as the units killed off. So let's see what he will decide to do. He does get the Belial Owl, so that's quite good. I don't exactly know how many cards are left in Ryan's deck though, which is slightly worrying. But we'll see. So he calls another Raven. The Ravens just keep coming. Somehow he just got all of them under control. Well, I guess it makes sense because he did drive check twice. He drive checked the Raven 2 times, both this turn, well, last turn and the turn before that. So it's definitely working out for him. So he's able to essentially just make the best use out of the skill. It is quite unfortunate that he doesn't, I keep bringing it up, but the Grozny, like I said, it does help a lot. Like, that's essentially the main objective with the stand trigger. You just want to keep using the stand trigger to build up power on Grozny, and with most matchups, it's going to work out quite well. So, Ryan is, you know, just kind of thinning out his deck as always, just calling any possible units that he can profit off of, and there's another Belial. I believe he's got 5 cards left in the deck now. So now he's going to use the first pair of Esras, so to draw himself a card and return the perfect guard to hand, and he still has another pair of Esras in the drop zone. Let's see if he'll use them. It looks like yes, he does. So he discards, retires the Belial Owl, which lets him draw an extra card and get the perfect card into his hand. So that will help him with the survivability of this turn. I think he might only have 4 cards left in hand, never mind the fact that he has 5 cards left in deck. The fact that he doesn't have many cards left in hand is also quite worrisome. He calls the first SRS. Never mind, he doesn't call the first SRS, he's still considering. No, he does call it. He does call it. I think there is a little bit of a dispute happening amongst the players. He calls one over the other one, and then calls a Belial Owl over it as well. And he's going to use it to retire the Belial Owl and draw another card and put the SRS down. He's going to use the Raven Hair, and it appears he forgot to shuffle for the skill. But you know, yeah, we can. You might be able to hear a little bit from the players. They are sort of, well, it's essentially a joke, but they are not. I wouldn't say upset, but you know, Ryan did forget to shuffle. You know, in this kind of match, with all the community matches, they do have a more friendly atmosphere, so this kind of thing tends to be allowed. But with, of course, with more official BCS matches, for example, that most likely would be frowned upon. But we could take a quick look at Ryan's damage zone as Nicholas confirms it, and Ryan is still trying his best to loop. And now I wonder how many cards he has left in the deck. Oh, okay, he's actually using the Abyssal Owl to look at the top 7, but the top 7 is essentially his entire deck. That's quite interesting. It's actually kind of funny to see. It's definitely quite an entertaining game, but I guess he's just calculating his odds and any other things he could do this turn, and you know, he does still have the GB8 that he hasn't used, which will potentially give him extra attacks, but it's, yeah, this is definitely a very interesting game. Definitely a very interesting game. I don't know if... I'm kind of trying to figure out what Ryan is trying to do in order to take the win. So he will now finally use the GB8 to retire 2 grade 1s. At least I think he's now retiring the 2 Abyssal Owls in order to search for 2 of the Esras. And then I would... God, I'm actually slightly confused. I apologize, but I'm slightly confused. Well, he does buff up. Okay, at least he gets the buffs. That is definitely one point I forgot, that he does get a significant buff on the Esrases. So they are now going to be hitting for 21, and he was able to remove both of Nicholas's rear guards thanks to the GB8 skill as well. And, well, the thing is, still, Nicholas has a 9, I believe, 9 or 10 or possibly 11 card hand, which is, yeah, it's going to be quite hard to overcome. And Ryan calls everything. He's going to go for the last ditch effort. So this first one, hitting for 21, actually, like, this is actually a pretty good strategy. I wasn't able to kind of understand it at first, but he's able to essentially call out 2 21k SRSs, which will then, oh my god, the Bellog actually killed the first one off. What he was trying to do is to call both of them be at 21k and then get the double stand off of the drive check and stand them both and try to finish it off this turn. But oh my god, he has another Bellog in hand. He can just end it right there. That is it. The entirety of Ryan's strategy just foiled in front of his eyes. Oh my god, I can't believe Nicholas just did that. That is actually quite insane, because what Ryan was working so hard to achieve for that entire turn has just been foiled. He gets the double stand and the perfect guard. His entire strategy just fell apart. It would have worked out perfectly if not for those 2 Bellogs. Oh my god, that was purely amazing. I apologize for not being able to put my hand on it at first, or my finger on it rather, but Jesus Christ, that was actually insane. Like, that level of play was actually very impressive. So now Nicholas goes into his own GB8. He calls 2 Mubdis and the stand trigger, and uses the stand trigger skill to draw 1, and I believe it's just... Okay, well, first we have the GB8 skill going off, which will retire everything on the field, of the opponent's side of the field, and also pump up his units. He gets a crit, and I'm afraid that's going to be it for Ryan, and Nicholas takes the win. So that was a very entertaining end to the match, and I hope you guys enjoyed it just as much. So that's going to be it for me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.